don't have a line of social responsibility, you have to have a line made out of material to make sure that you can properly paint the picture the dog needs to see of what the house is going to look like. So the drag line is there in case they go to bolt for the door, they're going to jump at the other dog's kennel or whatever it is. Instead of having to actually physically chase the dog around, you can just step on the line or reach down and grab the line, or preventatively, you know they're coming to the door, you can put your hand on the line to make sure they're not going to bolt, things like that. But if you have a more serious case, we will use umbilical cord training or tether training, right? So I want to use a flat buckle collar. I like to use wide, thick, flat buckle collars because they're not irritating, they're comfortable. If the dog has a little bit of pressure, it's not this irritating like aversion feeling of pressure, it's just a little pressure because it's wide and thick and comfy. If the downside to those kinds of collars, unless you have them crazy tight, which I don't want to have, they might be able to slip their head out if they're really fighting. They're not going to slip their head out mild, but if you're talking like a dog that is unaccustomed to any kind of control or is potentially violent when faced with pressure, if you're thinking it's like a feral type of dog and when they feel pressure they're going to kind of try to freak their head out of it, then you got to use a slip, ideally a slip as backup. So put a little slip collar on the dog, a little cheap nylon slip collar, not for the purpose of correcting, not for the purpose of being mean, but as a backup. Like I'll put the flat buckle collar on them and also a slip collar that is attached to the leash. They feel the pressure of the flat collar. This is not even an issue unless they get out of this and then they're still in the line. I do that to make sure the dog doesn't learn how to slip the collar. But as soon as I don't need that anymore, then I stop using it and just go transition to straight flat buckle collar, so it's no big deal. And eventually you shouldn't need direction in the house, and you shouldn't have to wear a collar in the house at all if you don't want to, right? So like eventually the goal is to have the dog not on any gear at all when they're hanging out at liberty, but in the beginning we're gonna have to teach them something. So flat buckle collar. If you think you have like a feral level dog of like, that's gonna slip the flat, put a backup slip on. When you no longer feel like you're in that situation, you can stop using the backup slip. Learberg makes a leash. They make it for prong collars, but I don't use it for that. I use it for flats. But it's like a leash that has a secondary line for a backup. It's for prong collars with a backup slip. But if you just replace the prong collar with a flat buckle collar, the flat buckle is the active collar. The secondary line is just the backup in case they get out of it. And it's nice, again, if you're working with severely aggressive dogs and you need to use a slip collar as a defensive tool instead of a training tool, then there's always this secondary line that you can reach down and grab if you need to. That's not for training, that's for defensive tactics, but if you're working with those dogs, it's something you might have to consider. But flat buckle collar, unless you need a slip for a backup. Once you don't need the backup, don't wear it anymore. Once you don't need the house management, don't wear any collar. You're all set.
There we have Mabel in a drag line. You can see it, she moves around. It's just a little line. Just a nice little nylon line that drags around and makes it easy in the house if you need to step on it to catch them. This is a very short one. You could have it as long as you want. You could have it 10 feet or whatever. Just be aware of it wrapping around. I cut the handle off the end of it. Be aware of it wrapping around things so it doesn't pull chairs over and stuff, but it lets you have an easier way to manage the dog. If the dog's about to rush the doorway right now, it's much easier for me to step on that line and stop them than it is for me to try to catch them at a dead run. So that is the first level of house management.
So what I will do with tether training is I will get a leash and I can attach it to my belt if I want to put it through the belt through the handle, or I can just loop it through and stick the thing through the handle like this, and now it's attached to my belt. But honestly, it's a little bit of a bigger pain in the butt. I'll usually get a shorter line and put that around my waist, and then I can attach the leash to that line like so, right? So I have this leash attached, but this thing can go around me 360. So then it doesn't matter where the dog is, where I am in relation to the dog, this thing can go around me without getting tangled up on me, and I don't have to worry about it. This line will then get attached to the dog. And then this is just straight umbilical cord training, right? Like, I have this dog attached to me. The dog is going to learn two very valuable lessons. They're going to learn to yield to leash pressure, because when I get up, I'm not going to give commands. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to let the leash tell them what's going on. And feel free to use social, come on, baby. Like, you can use some social pressure, but don't give commands or cues. We're not trying to teach commands right now. We're trying to teach acquiescing to spatial, social, and leash pressures, the basic pressures, right? So if I'm, being inviting to my dog like this, my dog should walk into me. If I push my body into and towards the dog, they should back away. And if the leash gives them feedback, they should yield. They should yield to spatial, social, and leash pressure. So umbilical cord training is just the easiest, most basic way to do it. If you're in a real serious situation with your dog, they're either in their crate or they're on the tether. And people say, well, when do they get off the tether? When do they get off the umbilical cord? When you have a line of social responsibility, you do not need a line of leather. But until you have one of social responsibility, you need a line of leather, right? So then I'll flip the camera angle around so you can see what this looks like. This line is attached to my dog, and it is also attached to my waist, right? So it's just a tether. For some reason, having it not attached to your arms lets you kind of emotionally detach and not get in such a tug of war. Because I am just going to walk away, and when I walk away, that leash pressure, as small as it is, gives my dog the signal, and they learn to stay with me. I can stop walking, they'll hang out, just my baby girl, right? And that's the way it is. I'll make another angle so you can see this from outside.